Hey everybody, so we're at the technically May coffee hour for Network Automation Nerds Learning Community. However, it is technically June on the calendar because we're very excited to have Mischa to share his knowledge freshly back from AutoCon 1. So for this hour's topic, we'll talk about his experience on using white boxes as opposed to vendor provided tool sets or ecosystem, as well as experience on AutoCon 1. So I know even before we started, Mischa, you said you when you travel back, you actually had like a under the weather a little bit. You caught some cold, so again, appreciate you being here, share the experience, and I know we'll glean a lot of good information from you. So maybe to start with, you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and like what you did before, set the context of like what your domain knowledge has been.
hmm Yeah, thanks a lot, Eric. Really appreciate it to be here. I'm a big fan of yours and what you do the work. So so I'm actually a network engineer by education. So I went to University of Applied Sciences, and
Hmm.
besides actually getting the network knowledge there that you can get, we learned a lot of stuff in the Unix domain. So this has been an early love for me and domain that I really got interested in. So I first worked for a firewall vendor in Germany. They build a firewall that is based on OpenBSD. They still
Hmm.
exist, and they're quite large in the with uh, state officials and military. And then later, I actually, for many years, I worked for the university in Basel, Switzerland. So I worked for the network and security team there, be in a Cisco shop at the time with a large campus with 100 different places over the city. And actually, for Basel, there's other big corporations like Novartis and Roche, but the biggest network in the city was actually from the university. So
Mm.
it's not huge, but it still has it's fun because you have the craziness of the students, you have like classic administrative domain, and you have the research and education stuff, which is also can with the supercomputing facility having really big data loads and stuff like that. So it's, I think, a really interesting domain to work in.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
yeah.
to that friend, I mean, I know in the US, and I believe this is international, like Internet 2, right? Like it's a separate internet infrastructure where in fact, that's where OpenFlow kind of developed and kind of test into production. So were you involved in any of the besides the campus or the Internet 2 stuff, or were you just basically running the campus network?
Yes, so both the campus and data center network and the supercomputing facility network is different today. Actually,
Yeah.
the supercomputing facility is now customers of ours, but we can come to this topic. But anyway, so we're actually building the infrastructure. There's a research and education network under which each country in Europe actually operate. I think there's an NRAN in the US also, or many of them. And under this hood, they actually provide their own network. So between the universities and, for example, CERN, there's like a shared network space. And but we didn't engage in the internet too at the time. So
Hmm.
it's just more really exchange between the the universities and then the on the nation level the NRANs, the National Research and Education Networks, which is
Got
also
it.
really interesting because they usually so when they have great projects where they where they push the boundaries for especially high speed workloads because that's what you have. For example, if you need push a lot of data from Basel to CERN, you somehow have to get it there and yeah
That's where
and
we
that
come in, right?
exactly
We get the
exactly.
packet from one end to the other. Yeah. So you mentioned you're at the university. So and for a while it seems. And did you go from university to work for a VAR, or is that something in between?
At the time at the university, a friend of me who was also in the team where we worked, we had this use case where we had to run a whole bunch of legacy stuff inside the university network and in all kinds of places like big MRIs with Windows XP steering computer
Yeah.
and medical stuff and but all kinds of different experimentation equipment, and you couldn't. There's many times you couldn't update it. There's maybe even not the vendor existing anymore, and we had to run all this in the network. And one way to actually deal with this is put all these devices in separate zones, but that's also a lot of work, especially moving them, readdressing them for the decentralized team. So we actually figured it's much easier to keep it where they are, but secure them in a way. So we developed like a micro-segmentation solution based on a little hardware. And that's where we started our own company with this idea and with the use cases from there. And it's called Narrowwind. That's where I work today. And yeah, this was the first. We built the system to be as plug and play as possible, so that you can in a decentralized environment, you can just hand out the devices and the people could secure whatever they wanted to secure. And the default use case being you're actually securing the endpoint, not being accessible from the network anymore, but the endpoint can still go everywhere at once. So
So is that
and
is that where you start to explore the white box solutions, or just to have sort of maybe like a more flexibility and cost down? Is that where you started?
Exactly. So, but on a small scale, right? So I can maybe hold up the box. It's just
Oh
it's just a
wow.
it's just a mini firewall that actually runs OpenWRT, a Linux-based embedded system that can run on very many socks, and through it, it runs then NF tables and the Linux goodies. And so this was actually the first. So the question was why didn't we implement it on the network infrastructure? So potentially we could have implemented it on the switchboard. So when we then grew a bit from the company perspective, we also got into hospital domain, and they potentially have thousands of devices they need to secure in a way that they're not patchable. They're whatever medical certificate they have, they cannot, unless the vendor brings out a new patch, and then it's also hard to actually roll it out. So they said we cannot deploy thousands of hardware boxes. Just the mere fact that the handling is just too complicated. So then we thought how we actually can fix it or how we can potentially get the same security level on going over switchboard and a switch ACL, dynamic switch ACLs. But that gets much more complicated and has much more effort also on the central team. So our approach was more having a decentralized way to deal with the problem now,
Hmm.
because we did with a lot of security and security responsible people and CISOs from universities and hospitals in Germany and Switzerland, over 25 interviews, long interviews where we actually where we're asking how they're dealing with the problem, how they see the problem space, and many times so one of the key findings was that they believe in some way of SDN solving this problem for them in any point near future, right? But that's not happening, right? This is something we can now say. This has been 4 years ago, and back then also. I mean, I see the point, and I still see it, and it's a valid point, but it's not. So it's also like a false trust in what the vendors, I think, today kind of promote with their the Cisco's with their DNA sender, or Extreme with XMC, where you think this could solve you this problem, but it's the complexity they bring with these systems, and like, for example, a campus fabric. I mean, it just adds the complexity, and if you're now we're talking about the university, that's a big business in a way that is usually rather large network. But how do you solve this for smaller networks? And we just want a usable approach for to act upon now. And actually, obviously, the stateful firewalling on the box has some more security features than just stateless ACLs on the switchboard. But still, I mean, we came up also with another solution that you can actually implement it on the network infrastructure with a bit of less security. But it also came, the microsegmentation solution came with a central management where it's easy to update this stuff. So that's what we thought would be the thing, but we kind of got back to earth in a way that hospitals, they're really slow in decision making, and universities too. So
So what is your I understand the reasoning behind it, right? But so
uh-huh.
what is your tech stack right now that for you to deploy like your uh, security solution, the two ports, little switch, and dynamic management and secure for like maybe SMEs or as small and medium sized businesses. So what is
Yeah.
the tech stack right now?
So that's actually, so with this it's actually really simple. So we bring in a, so it's usually, so we started with thinking we want to have a software as a service solution, but like every single customer we talked to, they wanted it on prem. So we figured, okay, that's what we do. So we deliver a VM that um, has some today some Dockers running that actually run with fast API, the usual stack that you also actually I saw at AutoCon many times, and I was really happy to see it because it proved that we didn't, that we're on the right path there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And yes, it's not today. It has a React front end, and it reaches out. The thing with the micro segmentation, what we implemented is that the device itself connects to the controller, because if you're somewhere buried behind some, nuts or firewalls or whatever,
yeah.
you just need a way to connect to the controller, and then there's the connection there where it can grab updates or a new policy. And but actually going into SMEs, and we have quite some customers in the energy sector that
Okay,
in Europe, it's, I don't know about the US, but if the energy sector, they are usually considered critical infrastructure
sure.
for the countries, and
Yeah.
they have to oblige a minimum standard that the government gives out. So when we got into this sector, we were quite surprised to get into some of these places where, not micro-segmentation was the problem, but segmentation was the problem. There's
Okay.
barely any segmentation yet, some VLANs maybe, but, organically grown over the years, networks where you would potentially, where even, where we were thinking, how does it even still work? It's like, it's yeah. So, but that's something. So it was, so from a, if you're a tech geek, you would think maybe this it's not interesting, but for me it was really interesting, because then we figured, okay, how can we for these figure out where they are, figure out where the organization stands, why kind of figure out why they are there, and then find a way to evolve the system so they can have a, you know actually standard compliant system which has enough security and speed, whatever they need for the next 5 years. So, and then transfer actually all these great ideas that are in this new technology that we find today to this domain, and think about, okay, what can we leverage from this domain, um, making it easy for them to deploy, for example, a new VLAN. If you have a fabric, you don't think about this. I mean, you don't care about VLAN so much. You just use them. So how can we actually transfer it to actually a multi-vendor environment? What you usually find there too. That's also a problem, right? If you have Cisco fabric, or all these fabrics are vendor specific mostly. You can go then actually to the white boxes, but also their interoperability is kind of hard to find.
So
And
so
yeah,
let me cut you a little bit, and I'm sorry to do this, but I'm still kind of
yeah,
confused on,
okay.
what is it that like the kind of the overall picture, right? So you talked about, so previously when you showed me like the switch, and I imagine there's a, like kind of a campus network where you mentioned you have like some Dockers that does the management. So I would imagine some of the policies are being pushed down to the
Hmm.
switch, and
Hmm.
then a lot of a centralized management on getting the data back. But in a environment that you described, like a critical energy sector, right? So I
Hmm.
imagine a lot of IoT devices out there in the
Hmm.
edges,
Hmm.
maybe even environmentally protected, right? Like, you're protected from the environment, so it's hardened shell for like rain, snow, and all of that. But
Totally.
those can't be all backhaul into the centralized location, right? So are those like kind of white boxes that you're managing, or are those still vendor solution? You're just using their APIs to, kind of centralize the decision making.
So it depends, right?
Okay.
so, so actually, the white box, I wouldn't, I wouldn't focus mostly on the white box aspect. I would rather more focus on the, the efficiency and the money point, like the how expensive is it to
Okay.
actually deploy something.
So let's just
So
say Cisco has a box that's very easy to manage and really economical. Then so be it, right? Like
yes.
you just use it.
So if it actually we look, so maybe I can share a picture that brings
Okay.
in a bit. So um
Yeah, if you look at that little screen, there's a screen share. Oh, bam, there it is.
so if so that's so the idea we have is actually, so when we come in we try to, that's what I was trying to make. So my point is we evolved from being a micro segmentation solution with the tech stack we had, with the experience
Hmm.
we had, to figuring out, okay, we get into a SME. They are, they are back in the 90s from from their aspect of maturity, good or bad. But now what do we do now? How do we get to a way, in a way, to a modern design and then also implementation, but
Right,
also always having in mind the state the organization is in, the people that work there. What is that? What can, because if you put some high end stuff in there, and like the DNA center, we found it at three of these customers just sitting there doing nothing, and they're like, could you maybe help us using it for something? And we're like, I know it's the wrong approach, so let's figure out what we want to solve, and then maybe it can help us.
got it.
Maybe it can help us upgrading the OS, being a huge, really expensive solution for this. But so we try to come in and figure. So that's where we developed the solution. So we wanted to come up with like a reference design like this. So you have different zones that have security markers on them, and being easy to understand and describe, like your services and access layer, and here's your IoT stuff being isolated maybe, and then translate this to actually the infrastructure they have. If they have a life cycle, we could say, okay, let's figure out. So we then figured out for us, if there's a life cycle and they ask us what to do, we want to have a vendor that actually meets the price tag and is actually stable operating system. So we were actually going for MikroTik. It's also a European network company, and they provide now, really, they have, so the price tag calculation we have for complete network is usually it's 1/10 of the price to Cisco
Mm,
Extreme.
right,
and
right.
and with and we managed to actually deploy it in a automated way, actually be using Ansible or now also Nornir, and building this in a way that we can actually provide these customers with a standardized set where they can build upon. With this automation chain, helps us to, that to actually give this price to them, and have a standardized good network that they operate. And
I see. So
yeah.
if I okay, so my apology for not understanding earlier, but if what I'm hearing is what you're saying is it starts with the architecture. It starts with like this overall picture. You come in and you need to, instead of just focus on a technology or taking the vendor's design, like your
Hmm.
three-tier design or your cloud network, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You come in,
Hmm.
and the key for you was to have a proper segmentation on whatever it is, right? Like you have a color code here, like your IoT device, and your maybe your core network, your edge, your like your pod basically, and then you shoe in the vendor solutions or non-vendor solution, doesn't really matter. But now that you have an architecture, then you could design the interfaces on interacting with other segments and so on. So is that accurate, or is that
Yes,
something that
that's very accurate. And actually, when we get in, usually we are blind. So what also SuzyQ does is something that also we implemented for ourselves, but not in the scale of SUSE-Q, but with actually the same technology. And it actually looks, so when we get in, we do like we build a digital twin of the network. So we go in, if it's a vendor that we support, if not, we have to deal with to figure out with the customer, because this helps us a lot. So we get like, this is an OT network, right? This is like,
Hmm.
this has like a circle and long chains actually going back, because that's actually for energy spread over a huge geographical you know spread. So that's actually organically grown network due to the fiber in the ground or the fibers they can attach for their
Right.
copper stations. So
Right.
and then okay, this gives us a first. So this gives us a first indicator of what we have today,
Right.
and then what we can actually do. So we have here also we have the color coding already. So we kind of try to then bring in. So this is the VLANs that they have or potentially have, and then we try to bring in our color coding. So I don't know if you heard about the Purdue model. It's big in OT. It's like it's like the OSI model, but for security zoning in OT networks. But then all the way goes up to the IT net layer and the external stuff. So then we try with this, because that's just giving a different representation for the people to talk about what we want to do
Got it.
with the network, because they're usually not network specialists. So in SMEs, even bigger ones, they don't have dedicated network people. It's just some people that have to do the network stuff on top and the security stuff, which is the reality, right? And
Right.
they're not so fortunate. So we try to bring in this kind of color coding, and then on top of this, then think about how we can actually deploy this to the switch port and to whatever their technology is there. So here it's actually based on MikroTik. So we built something where you can easily set the switch port from the UI.
Yeah.
But that's not something. So that's not something mandatory. So for us, this tool is actually first you get an overview. What do we have? Get a digital. What's the assets? What's the inventory? Recurring MAC address table. IPR, all this stuff, and um, also what we found is in these networks, many times they fight spanning tree problems. So they're
Yeah.
organically grown. They even big hospitals, even you would not imagine, even huge hospitals that we came in that have enormous, immense layer two domains, broadcast
Yeah.
domains. They fight this, and for them, for example, so there we leverage with something like this. We leverage the net map to actually show spanning tree topology and to potentially show them, look, here the yellow stuff is you disabled spanning tree on this port. So now if you actually here due to some new fiber shortcut this, you have a loop or something like this, right? But so the red
Right.
ones are actually the block ports by the protocol. The green stuff is actually the yellow stuff shows where you have disabled it on a port, and this green backlight shows which is the spanning tree route. So this is just a showcase how we're trying to figure out what the problems are in the domain that we
Hmm.
that we act upon, and then what's the potential to put this onto something useful for them to operate on. And this actually helps a lot, right? So this way you can say, okay, look, so this is actually the real spanning tree route that acts in this network. So there would be a loop if this wasn't blocked. So this operates right. So it's really easy to act upon and talk about these kind of topics. That's but that also scales. What we build now is you can actually have multiple of these networks visualized. So then you just segment them in smaller pieces and just visualize them at a time. I mean, somehow doesn't make sense if you have this huge network and you don't see anything in there. But I mean, for debugging it works. But that's a bit the direction we try to orient and think how can we then leverage the technology and the features available and make these networks more
Man, like,
resilient and more secure. Yeah.
what's amazing, Misha, is you are able to do all of these in a relatively straightforward, right? Like, I mean, you just casually pull up this map, but like, you know how hard it is to create a digital twin. I mean, I know how hard it is to create a digital twin, even for like a modest size network, right? And then it seems like you invested so much time and energy, and you must have already have a know-how to begin with, right? Like it's like what I'm saying is you didn't start from zero. You must have started from somewhere that you already possess the knowledge, but you just need to um, find the right solution, like making this graph or doing a digital twin or having management interface on these devices. Is that true? Because I see this as a lot of work, right? Especially if somebody who doesn't really know automation or Python or any kind of front end React, that sort of stuff.
So actually, the two of us that started the journey. So the other guy, he's really an amazing front end guy. He actually
Okay.
came up with all this. So this is actually our this we have refactored this now. This is done in PHP, and this was our first prototype. Actually, we built this for one customer that we had to get. They had huge problems, and we figured we need some visualization of the network, and went out and thought about, okay, and we're really standing on the shoulders of heroes like Kirk Byers with NetMiko,
Yeah.
Nornir, the text FSM templates, especially provided also by NTC. In this case, actually, it's more niche vendor that we use, but also most of the big vendors we have a starting point, and that's also something really great that I see. And on top of this, and with all the examples and the nice courses there are, we actually then with this we could actually launch this in such a quick way, and have this first prototype done for this customer, and then just continued on the journey and added stuff and added vendor support. So the solution is also, so I think, gone in the same direction as SUSY-Q, but SUSY-Q is for much larger networks and has a different focus. So what we actually want to also emphasis on is then we also, so we brought in all this data to the customer, and we said, look, now you can it's really nice actually. You can if you want to know, do I have any Synology in my network? And it's like, oh, boom, there's like 8 Synologies. We have like
Right.
four in the inventory, and then you try to figure out where are they attached, and you kind of zoom out to the network, and you see, okay, here they are in this architecture, they live here, and stuff like this. So this is nice, and we have all the data and data tables, and you can search and do on it. But what we figured with the customers in SMEs, which are not network engineers, we do the network on the side, they 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 don't know what question to ask to the network. So
Hmm.
so we figured, okay, we need to find the most common actually questions that are necessary to ask yourself to have a resilient and stable network, and then
Right.
give them the chance to act upon it. So for example, this simple check, it actually looks for multiple MAC addresses behind an access port. So potentially somebody else put another network device behind it, because usually on an access port you have one or maybe a few if you have VMs on there. And then, if you have like 20 Macs behind an access port, you potentially should check out what's going on there. Why is that? And because this is also how loops happen, right? People put in one one port, then they put another one, and then all of a sudden you have this instability in your network. And simple things like this that seem, maybe to people that are really knowledgeable, they seem obvious, but for this kind of group that we work for and that we want to help, that's really valuable, because that way we can or here spanning tree activated to unknown neighbors, to neighbors which we don't know from a network perspective. That's why
Right.
would we talk 10. They're potentially evil. We don't want to speak spanning tree to them, and stuff like this. So this is what we are evolving on. And yeah, to your question, it's been a journey for 2.5 years now.
I love the fact that you have a little question mark, right? Because like you said, like this, the other engineers, they don't care about spanning tree. They just care about
Yeah,
like whether that service is up or not. So when you
yeah,
show them here spanning tree, like what is that? And then so you click on question mark, it'll be like, yes, okay, so this one ensures that your link is up and and so on and so forth. And I imagine like the MAC address, like, so is 20 bad? Yes, yes, 20 is pretty
yeah.
bad.
Exactly. Actually, it's um It actually usually it says show info, so it actually says why we think it's a problem, and we
Got
also
it.
try to give an action to enable them to actually say what do I do about it, because that's another thing, right? They okay, great, we have it, we have this, but now what do we have to do now with it? And that's a bit the focus that we try to emphasize on, which maybe is a bit different from others in this space. Also people that I got to know at AutoCon, that the products they have, and so far it's been actually a great journey, and also successful in a way that it helps people really to manage and operate their networks in a better way for them.
Yeah, this is actually really amazing. And you mentioned
Thanks.
AutoCon. So as we said at the top of the hour, you just got back from AutoCon, and you were on this 2.5 years journey. So I imagine you must be like really invested in it, and then you're excited to see other people in your tribe that for once I don't have to explain what spanning tree is, right?
Yes, I mean, and that was for me really coming there, and actually not only people from the tribe, but actually people I look up to for many years already, and people that I truly value for whatever they contributed to everything in this domain, like Dinesh Dutt from Suzy Q Stardust. He had the keynote at one of, so for me, really inspirational keynote, and then having actually the opportunity and tap him on the shoulder and ask him something in person and actually just have a conversation. That's, I mean, still gives me goosebumps, because that's something, where does that happen? And not only that, that's talking to these great people and having this, but also all the conversations that happen between somebody you don't know, the open and friendly community. I mean, really barely ever imagine or like experience something like this. It's more, usually, I don't know if you usually when you get back from a festival, which was great, then you have these memories, all these emotions, this 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 happiness inside, and this is how it was when I got back, because it was just such a really nice experience. Also, the way they had it set up, and the also the vendors, but it was not traditional vendors. It was just open conversation. There's not Nokia pointing at Cisco, they're bad, or NTC pointing at Netbox. So it's just a community. It's like, and that was very very um, encouraging, and hopefully next year they do it again in Europe. And
Oh yeah, I mean, I've talked to Scott. I mean, he's committed to, kind of keep this as long as people want it to be. And
yeah,
from everything I've heard, like the momentum is pretty strong.
yeah.
So, you just mentioned what I would think is like the best part about AutoCon, right? Like the openness, and then non-salesy, non like partying. It's really just strictly about like the technology,
Yeah.
friendliness, openness. What do you think it would be like a one thing that if you could change, what would be like a room for improvement for that? I mean, as good as it is.
So for me, it was, so I was really interested in the topic. So with this design that I showed you, for us, it's really important. So this far, we are really engaged in Autobot, and
Hmm.
and bringing it in as an IPAM, because that's usually missing. We're leveraging the golden config plugin to try
Right.
to make validations to reference designs that we can, in this example, and trying to, so at this, so the Nautapod, also Netbox UI is too complicated for our customers. So we're trying to put something in front of it that kind of gets out of our tool and makes things a bit more easy and digestible. And because usually these systems are also designed for larger corporations,
Sure.
from the ground up, from the data model, that the data you need to put in. So we wrote an adapter to Naudabot where we can put in the stuff that we get from the show commands and actually populate it,
Yeah.
pre-populate it, so that the network devices are there. But we have to do a lot of stuff that's missing to actually put the object there. We just put a placeholder, and to figure all this out, it's kind of a long journey. So it's even much too hard for the customer. So we're trying to abstract that, but still, it's great value that we get out of the tool. So actually having these people there that you can actually talk to them and just have these real conversations about real problems that you have takes time. And actually, I with with an with your guys from NTC, I at least spent 2 hours, and then also with the InfoHub guys and just the stuff. But then you're missing out on the talks because that's happening in the time where the talks are, because they're really, I mean, the breaks are really short, and and there's such amazing talks. Of course, you can say, hey, you can watch them later, but I'm a guy that, the energy in the room, it's different than when you watch it on a screen. And so that's a bit tricky to get a bit more space for the conversations, also the hallway conversations. I was lucky; I was there for the workshops also, and that gave huge amount of time to actually interact with others because they're much less tight schedule. But once it got started, I mean, it's really going, and so from that perspective, but maybe it's also just a flaw in my in the way I work because it's as good, the conversations are even better than going to the talks. But I really like the talks. There's such high quality talks in there and with inspirational, not so much about deep tech stuff, which I appreciate because usually if you're not in this domain, you kind of get lost sometimes then quickly. But more, about the journey. What's the also, not hiding what the problems were, what the issue, what did we do wrong? How can we do it better? What did we learn from it? And not just the shiny things, huge success stories, but how did we fail? And that's just honest, right? All the way up to, okay, this caused like burnout, and I had to, get medical help for so guys, be aware of this, and watch for yourself. And even this stuff, this is really valuable to me and very personal to my heart too, because that's in the industry, I think, something we also tend to go really long hours, go and potentially wear yourself out in a way that it's just not healthy. So that, and stuff like that's worth every minute to spend there and to acknowledge, and having the courage to actually say this in front of such a big crowd, that's also you know crazy to me, and really
Yeah,
nice experience.
I agree. I mean, I think it takes a lot of guts to be vulnerable,
Yeah,
and it's always it shows the person's confidence level, right? Like you have to be maybe twice as confident in order to show your vulnerability, especially in such a public forum. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's a common theme that I heard from people on if there's one thing that they could change about the event, what would it be? Is this like conflicting interests of I want the hallway track, like you said, and then I want this the session where there's the buzz and like I would imagine if you didn't sit for Dinesh's talk, you cannot go up and honestly tapping on the shoulder, right? So Dinesh would be like, I just talked about this in my talk. Were you not there? It was like, no,
yeah.
I was in the hallway. So yeah, so I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
And I don't think that's surprising.
but in his case, I must say I truly believe he's such a modest and just incredible man. He would not even mind you. He would. But it's just such an amazing character and person with a great heart. And to see that, right, to see somebody like him show up there and be so engaged, and you know uh, that's just amazing to see.
Yeah, I think Dinesh is just super humble. And when I talked to him on my podcast, I mean,
Hmm.
he actually was talking about like giving up money, like a ton of money, just to be with his family and like, sacrificing. Oh, he doesn't even see it as a sacrifice, right? It's just basically to him, it's a no brainer, right? I want to spend more time with my daughter. So, who
Yeah,
cares if there's any. So yeah, I would agree with you that even if you had done that, it wouldn't be like treated as a bad thing. But
no,
yeah, I don't
but
know
that's
how
okay.
to solve that on the competing interests. Sorry, I cut you off. Go
No,
ahead.
you can't. So I think so that the thing is usually in other conferences, it's not. First of all, people are not at all as accessible as there, and as the community being so friendly. And even over lunch, you can, you just get into a chat. This happened twice to me, and then you just stand there for an hour because it's so interesting, and you're just on a,
It's like, hey,
and
Misha,
it's
remember to
incredible.
breathe and remember to eat, right? Like,
Yes,
because you're just standing
exactly.
there, you're like, I'm just like
Yeah,
trying to soak it
and
in.
exactly. And what was really crazy, put some, they put like 5 sessions as lunch sessions where you can actually attend, which also sounded really interesting. Where you take your lunch for the discussion with like a, a guided topic, but that was just too much for me. I just had to stand there, had lunch, and but then again, you get it. But yeah, it's not something bad. It's also hard to solve totally. I mean, you just
Yeah.
kind of have to agree with it. But yeah, and by the end of the day, I was really, you really, what you did, and it's been so much interaction, and um, so I just got back to the hotel and and relaxed.
And just crash and be like, give me the
Yeah,
information
exactly,
overload.
exactly.
That's how
Maybe.
I feel when I go to like PyCon or something like that. I'm like, okay, I thought I'm okay, right? Like I'm an okay
Yeah,
coder, like I should get by, but no, when I get back to the hotel, I'm just like, oh my God, like I need like five different brains to like support me because all of these are all useful information, but a lot of things that they just over my head. But
yeah,
no, I mean, it sounded like you had a great time, and
yes, for
I
sure.
really wish I could have made it, but it just didn't work out. But I think I'll be able to make it to AutoCon 2
Too,
in
yeah,
Denver this year,
Denver.
so hopefully.
It's worth it, totally worth it. I must say, I was once at PyCon that was in EuroPyCon in
Yeah,
Basel, actually, in Switzerland.
yeah,
I had a similar experience there. I was really new to the community. I have barely ever, because I'm a network engineer, but I was just interested, and I
right.
went, and it also blew my mind. It was so, even so for newbies, the setup. So I was sitting there with the guy from ETH Zurich, it's a really famous university. He was explaining me the basics for Python just in his spare time, because he signed up for it, and for 4 hours we were sitting there, and I was like, okay, how is it? This is just great. I mean, this
Yeah,
this is what community is about, right? It's not, that, and it's so friendly, and actually, I want to make it to PyCon in the US once. I heard from many people that it's totally worth it.
yeah. I
I made
mean,
DEF CON once. That was awesome.
wait, who did you meet again?
I made it to DEF CON once.
Oh,
That was
DevCon. Yeah, yeah,
also
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, the first PyCon that was US was 2000, I want to say 13 or something. And then I just happened to bump into like Guido van Rossum during breakfast
Yeah.
line. And I was just like, I had this moment, right? I'm like, okay, should I say hi? I mean, I'm sure the guy just wants to grab breakfast. But he turned out to be really, really friendly. And, he's, like, German guy, right?
Yeah.
So he's pretty, like, and he's mathematician. So that's his personality, right? Like it's just I don't want to say cold, but like kind of a reasonable, strict, and but he was super friendly, and we say hi, we took some pictures, and I'm like, hey Guido, you're awesome. And back
Yeah.
then he was still like the head of the benevolent dictator. So he
Mhm.
wasn't a community. So I was like, hey, that was great about when do you think Python 3 is going to be migrated over and so on and so forth. But yeah, I agree. I think PyCon and Python in general has the best culture, and I hope AutoCon could still continue this culture being, because inevitably when you scale out, right, it's different from 200 to 2,000 people.
Yeah. And that was actually also interesting. That's actually one point. Maybe now that we talk about it, that one of the topics was also how. So first, AutoCon was the headline, or the whatever topic was, why haven't we reached full adoption yet? So it's,
Yeah,
and this theme continued in this. So they were talking a lot about network engineers not interested in coding, or coders feeling downscaled or downsized to actually learn network stuff, because that's something they, for network guys, maybe it's an upscale if you learn programming too, but maybe they're not interested. And it was really interesting to hear the arguments about it, and the way how you can actually find your way into it. And um, there's obviously also different ways, but maybe they can offer this a bit like these tracks, like they have it at PyCon, where you can sign up and just have somebody walk you through like a setup with TextFSM, and for whatever like simple stuff, but that the show commands, that's something you already know by heart as a network engineer. So how do you now pack it into some Python code? What and it's become so easy. There's just maybe this they not knowing what you would get yourself into, and if you have like this kind of start. Actually, the workshops kind of did this, but they had already some. You had actually for some of them you had to have quite some Python experience. But then there was Container Lab, for example, which is completely amazing, and was also had this great workshop for 3 hours, and you bam, you have a setup that you can start labbing with, which is you know performant and works great, and yeah,
Yeah, I think
pretty
I think you just hit it on the nail. So that's something that PyCon has done, and maybe AutoCon could leverage is more segmentation, right? Like more
yeah,
segmentation into the tracks. So you find something that, if you're a beginner, here's like, 10 different sessions and the hallways you could go. If you're intermediate, if you're advanced, like here's the better arrangement of your time and energy and money, more guide rails for you to go. And that might be able to solve the problem about, sessions versus hallway tracks. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, totally. I totally agree that that would be one way they can go, and it's always, as you said, also for me. I mean, I get back to the hotel, and wouldn't say I feel like I know nothing, but I, as you said, I just see like, okay,
Oh, I feel like
how
100% of the time.
what kind of crazy people are out there? I mean, it's also, but it's also encouraging to get this vibe and to get this energy, but also for people that they don't need to, potentially what others would call simple stuff. It doesn't matter. It can be really enriching, and actually for their use case be very useful. And that's also something that I appreciated, for example, in Dinesh's keynote, where he says, forget about achieving that all the vendors have the same data
That's
model,
right. It's
like
a pipe
open
dream. Yeah.
config. Forget about it. If we start
Right.
now with saying, okay, let's he called it toolchain 2.0, where we have some like tooling that works around this problem and helps us, even with simpler things. And this is how you get started, right? Also with the automation journey, it's not that you build a full Ansible automation pipeline, but you grab some information, you work with it, you maybe, for us, it's also, at this point, we're only reading. We're not, only in the prototype, we push config, because this is a completely different domain. If you fuck up there, it's like, that really can scale with automation. I mean,
Right. Right.
but yeah, and then from these use cases, then it spreads, right? That tool chain spreads, and the possibilities with these tools. There's various out there. I mean, also, you don't have to use Python. You can use Go, I guess, if you prefer that. If you're a Go person, or if you're a network engineer, that's also something that I liked. So he also emphasized, it's still going to need the good designs. You're still going to need the network engineers that actually dig how the protocols work, how the network works. And it's also fine if they don't want to get into programming, but maybe
Yeah.
we can bridge the gap in a way that, we interact in a way, in a friendly and nice way, that we can together then achieve something, yeah, of value for whatever corporation we work for, or even for ourselves. And that's also the open source part, that the Infra Hub guys that came out now with their open source tooling, that looks also promising, and of course NTC, and to see that, and you know besides, there's also some vendor specific stuff, which is also nice to look at, and I think that's what they did really, really well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love it. I love the energy. I love the continuation. And I mean, we could probably talk hours about this, but we
Yeah,
are coming up on the hour. And I just want to thank you again. I want to thank Keith for being here and Mischa for sharing your knowledge. It's very useful, and you know, um yeah, it's. I think you spent a lot of time building it, and yeah. Do you have any questions, Keith? I do have to have a hard stop at 1, so.
Sure. The only question I had is, in general, did you see or did you get to pick what OS did you guys use on your open or your white box switches? That was a question for me.
Hmm. So we chose OpenWRT. It's a Linux
Sure.
distributed, which actually works on a lot of socks. So we took quite some time. So actually, the ruggedized aspect is it's also important to now. The more we get into this energy sector domain, they need specific ruggedized hardware that they can deploy because yeah, the environmental stuff. So and that's not really easy for us to if we don't have support for the platform but OpenWRT does, then we can just switch the hardware and have a different sock or a different platform. And with the actually we have two options now. The other one being an ARM64 CPU with a bunch of memory. So if we do like WireGuard VPN stuff on top, so if we want to encrypt the transport layer, this gives us the possibility to do that in a really nice way. So that was, I think, a good decision for us and helped us for the flexibility and with the hardware below it.
Is that the same OpenWRT that used to run on the small Linux routers, like
The
and
Linksys,
Exactly.
yeah,
Linksys routers? Yeah,
It was
yeah.
yeah.
exactly.
That was
That's
the
where they
model
first got
number.
big. Yes, that's where they first got big with for the Wi-Fi support they had and for the
Mhm.
Linksys where they could run on. But now they actually they even have 10 gig switches that they run on with 48 ports. You know, that the hardware is out there.
All
I
right,
didn't know that. That's great.
I gotta
Hmm.
run. But hey, thanks
Thanks,
again,
Eric.
guys. It's been so great to talk to you both, and wish you have a wonderful day.
You too.
All right,
Cheers.
see ya. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.